Good afternoon. My name is Dan Wright, and I'm your host for TechDiver Chronicles Episode 5. Our special guest today is my personal friend, Nick Caruso, the captain and owner of the Old Salty 2, based in Belmar, New Jersey. Questions. Good afternoon, Nick. Thanks for being here. Describe briefly your start into scuba diving.
I guess that credit would go back to Lloyd Bridges and Jacques Cousteau. Growing up, used to watch Sea Hunt. That intrigued me about scuba diving. And Jacques Cousteau, the world of underwater was like something pretty cool that I wanted to experience. So at the age of 16, didn't drive yet. So I convinced my older brother, Anthony, to take scuba diving class with me. He says, all right, figure it out, find out who's offering classes, and I'll go ahead and do it with you. Contacted the local YMCA at the time, which was in Hackensack, New Jersey. Found out that Bernie Fiersick of Ski and Scuba Sports of Westwood was teaching classes there. Contacted him, and we started taking some classes. Went from open water to advanced open water to master diver, and eventually we became dive masters together. Both of us dove as dive buddies for a number of years together. Then my brother decided, I don't want to take any more of these classes with you, but if you want to continue, go ahead. So as a young kid, not having the funds for this expensive sport, decided that I would asked Bernie if I could work in his shop or help teach some classes there to supplement my passion for scuba diving. He agreed, became an assistant instructor through him, helped teach classes, and that's how I got my start initially.
At what point in your diving did it start really becoming more technical?
Well, while I was working at Ski and Scuba Sports, or helping out at the shop, I met a man called Ted Massotti. Okay, Ted had just moved up here from Florida. He had run a dive store down there. He had a hot girlfriend that came in to shop with him, so it piqued my curiosity about him. Ted and I became good buddies. Okay, best of friends. We dove together, traveled around the world diving together. He was very into diving, so I was like a magnet towards what he had. He was into doing wreck diving. So he started a company called Sea Journey. Sea Journey was responsible for wreck diving charters, okay, or dive charters per se. So we worked with different dive shops where if they didn't have a wreck diving schedule, we would promote the Sea Journey wreck diving schedule, and they would send us divers and we would take them out wreck diving. Wreck diving became pretty popular in the late 80s, 90s. We were running quite a few trips through there. We had dive boats that were going out, a few dive boats going out every weekend. So wasn't called technical diving at that time, but I guess it was the birth of wreck diving, or northeast wreck diving, which eventually transitioned into technical diving once 1990 came around.
What did you witness in changes in gas usage as you progressed in deeper diving?
Air was the only thing that was available for us at the time, okay? We wanted to do deep dives. We were into the wreck diving. We were very much into like recovering artifacts and, fish, things of that nature. But basically, air diving is what we were doing deep water, okay? We dive in wrecks like the Texas Tower, which bottoms out about 200 feet. In 87 is first time I started diving on the Andrea Doria. That was a 260-foot profile if you went to the bottom. So basically, in those early days, air was all that was available to us, so we were doing deep air dives, okay? The problem that was associated with deep air diving is you not only have the nitrogen narcosis effect, the narcotic effect, but also you had the oxygen toxicity effect. Typically what we did back in those days is we would dive deep air, do an air decompression right up to about 20 feet, and then at 20 feet we would go on to 100% oxygen to accelerate our dive profile. Calling it technical diving back then, I guess it was technical diving. It was deep diving. We were diving these deep profiles and we really didn't have tables for them, okay? We had the US Navy tables, which limited us to 180 feet, okay? But now we wanted to dive a little bit deeper, wrecks like the Doria, so we had to interpolate the tables as to what we thought was gonna be the decompression schedule if we followed the graph of the Navy tables. We did it, okay? It wasn't the smartest thing to do, but you know, I'm a living example that, you know, you could do some crazy things in life and still be around to talk about them. Once 1990 came around, that was the introduction to nitrox, mixed gas diving, trimix diving. The difference between deep air diving and mixed diving is pretty substantial, okay? You don't have any of the narcotic effect now once we introduced the trimix, okay? We had tables that were actually computer-generated tables that said this is what you should be doing. So it was much safer. It was much safer to dive to these deep depths with a clear head versus a not so clear head. You remember a lot more, you see a lot more, it's a much pleasant experience.
What gases did you use first in decompression when you started transitioning into trimix?
On the trimix end, 1750 was a pretty popular mix that we were using to do the dives that we were doing. When we were doing deep air dives, it was an air decompression with an oxygen at 20 feet, okay? We had very limited time that we could spend at depth, okay? We weren't spending more than like 10 to 12 minutes or 10 to 15 minutes at depth, and we were faced with a pretty substantial decompression just to play it safe. With the trimix, you have the computer-generated tables. You can carry more than one decompression gas to accelerate the time it'll take you to get out of the water. And basically, you can alter your gas, optimum gas technology, for the specific depth that you're going to be working. So with that, you know, we were using a 1750 mix. We may have had a 50-50 decompression gas that we had and an oxygen decompression gas that we would go to at like 10 feet. So it accelerated our time to get out of the water. It was safer in that we had a clear head. It was just the better way of diving and a safer way of diving these deep wrecks.
Were you and John Chatterton acquainted before you met at the dive shop? I understand that you had sequential numbers on your instructor certifications.
Met John while I was working with Ted with Sea Journey, okay? John had contacted Ted and said, you know, I'm doing a lot of shore diving. I hear you do a lot of boat diving, wreck diving. I'd like to, you know, try it. I'd like to get on board. So Ted contacted me. I was running dive mastering a couple of trips that weekend, and he says, hey, Nick, I got John Chatterton and his girlfriend at the time, Kathy. They're going to come on the boat and do some diving with us and, you know, feel him out because he's thinking about working as a dive master with us. So John and I hit it off, okay? He was a tradesman. He was a dock builder at the time. I was working as a carpenter at the time with my family. So him and I hit it off. We ran trips together through Sea Journey at the time and Ted. And we basically did a lot of diving together. Okay, we traveled to the Florida Keys back and forth. We did fish collecting down there, or I did fish collecting down there. He was there spear fishing at times. So yes, John and I were very good friends. I was best man at his wedding. his first marriage in Key West. That was a lot of fun. But John and I, at the time, we were assistant instructors at a shop out of Paramus, New Jersey. Open Water Sports is what I believe it was at the time. Ken Liggett was the owner. And through that shop, we were sent to instructor school. At that time, it was NASDS. Okay, so John and I were both sent to La Paz, Mexico, to NASDS College or NASDS School to become scuba diving instructors. So John and I were sent to La Paz, Mexico through that shop. They sponsored us to become instructors. So we get there, and we're there 2 or 3 days, and then one of the course directors comes up to John and he says, what's going on with this person that had sent you, or the shop that sent you there? Because we got a phone call, and the person that sent you here, he really wants us to put you through the ringer so you don't become instructors here. Not sure what his motivation was towards that. But our instructor trainer or our course director says, I find it hard pressed seeing that you two guys are the 2 top candidates coming out of this class. So it was pretty funny in that respect. I guess Ken at the time just wanted to keep a thumb on us and wanted to dictate when we become instructors or not. Came back from La Paz, we were NASDS instructors. Shortly after that, we left that shop and went and worked with another shop out of Denville, New Jersey. And it was a Nowie shop. Then the 3 of us, Ted Massotti, John Chatterton, and myself, crossed over to Nowie and became Nowie instructors. So now the Nowie education system allowed us more of what we wanted to do or the type of training that we wanted to do at the time. So that was a transition over to Nowie. But yes, John and I, very good friends. We grew up diving together. We did quite a bit of diving off the Seeker together. We did some travel diving together as well.
Describe your motivation to buy a dive boat. Was it primarily for charters?
92, Ted and I transitioned from Sea Journey into Sea Dwellers of New Jersey, which was a dive shop. So rather than running just a dive travel business and charter boat business, now we had a full-fledged dive shop that we opened up. At the time, we were running charters with 3 or 4 different dive boats. We had that much business going on, and it was just the natural matriculation into getting our own charter boat or getting our own charter boat. So when it came to that point, that would have been 98. So it would have been like 6 years later. Ted and I were still partners in the dive shop. Now it came time to buy a dive boat, and it was quite a big financial obligation. Ted, love him to death, was my best friend, but he was not a very good businessman. So when it came to purchasing the dive boat, I was the one that came up with the financial backing for it. So we talked it over, and it was like, we were running as 2 different corporations. You'd have the dive boat, and we'd have the dive shop. And then eventually I would transition to just have the dive boat, and I would give the dive shop to Ted. And that's the way it went down the line. So getting into the dive boat business was having enough business to supplement how many charters we could do in order to cover the expense of a dive boat. And we had that because we were running so many charters with so many different dive boats at the time.
How long have you been diving the Andrea Doria?
Prior to diving the Doria, I guess our biggest trip that we ran with the Old Salty was to the HMS Republic. Ted was contacted by Martin Burrell at the time and offered him a contract to supply divers to go out and dive the Republic, get video of the Republic, still photography, and also recover artifacts off the wreck. With that, he would be able to go to the courts and arrest the wreck. So we did that, okay? That was probably the year 2000. Had the boat, bought the boat in 98, so in 2000, in July of 2000, we put a team of divers together and went and dove the Republic. And did it. We recovered the artifacts that he needed. We gave him the still photography. We got the video footage. And to this day, I believe he still owns the rights to the wreck. He was able to go and arrest the wreck after our diving expedition or our diving adventures. We did. We started running trips to the Doria. We had technical divers. We had enough. It was taking like 10 or 12 divers for us to have enough to go out there and do that trip. So we started diving it, early 2000s is when we started going regularly out to the Doria.
Describe the transition between open circuit, closed circuit, and semi-closed on your charters.
Well, prior to the closed circuit rebreather, we had the semi-closed rebreather, okay? And, basically, the first unit that was out and available was the Draeger Atlantis unit, okay? And Ted and I were the first ones to introduce these to the Northeast on the wreck dives. Our instructor trainer at the time was Joe Odom of TDI, okay? He certified us as instructors for the Atlantis Draeger rebreathers, so we taught that. But it was only a nitrox rebreather at the time. The advantages that posed over open circuit is much more quiet, so you got to get up to the marine life without startling it, so photographers had a great time with it. It was warmer to breathe the gas due to the chemical reaction that was occurring, so it was a warmer breath. And you had more bottom time with a smaller tank, okay? So that was the semi-closed system. Advantages, as I pointed them out. As far as the open circuit is concerned, that has its advantages as well in the Northeast, just in the aspect of how it breathes, okay? The rebreather, you need to maintain a decent breathing parameter, okay? You cannot, you don't want to overbreathe it. You don't want to hyperventilate, okay? Or you're going to have other issues with the unit. On open circuit, it's not so much that you can overbreathe it, okay? It's just giving you an easier breath, from what I can see. So if you're in a strong current, it's easier to dive it or breathe on an open circuit unit versus a closed circuit or semi-circuit rebreather unit.
What are some of the drawbacks in using rebreathers on your charters? Are all the crew acquainted with the different rebreathers?
One of the drawbacks was our crew, not all of them were rebreather certified. So it was up to the individual that had this rebreather to know his system well. And it's hard for us to troubleshoot something that was going wrong with it because we weren't educated to have, on this particular unit. So drawbacks to it were basically if the unit wasn't working properly or your electronics weren't right or your oxygen sensor was blown, if you didn't have something to replace that, you weren't doing a dive, okay?
Are rebreathers or open circuit the way to go when you're diving in the rough Northeast?
With the rebreathers, okay, it's an expensive unit. The initial expense of the unit, is something that makes it not affordable for everyone, okay? The training that's involved with it as well. Each specific rebreather unit requires training on that specific unit. You have to be certified for this unit. So as far as my crew's aspect is concerned, unless one of my crews is certified in the same rebreather unit as one of the individuals that's diving, it's hard for him to support it, okay? It's hard to support another diver in a bailout situation on the rebreathers, okay? With, open circuit, someone's running out of air, you can, give them one of your safe second or a bailout bottle, and, they'll be, be able to safely execute the dive or come out of the dive. But, that was one of the disadvantages of it. Today, we're seeing more and more rebreathers out. I don't think they are a disadvantage. If the person is properly trained in the unit that they have, they can go out and have thousands of hours on that unit and never have a problem, okay? As far as a boat captain and charter boat owner, the rebreathers offer less cumbersome equipment on the boat if we're doing deep technical dives like the Doria, okay? Yes, they're gonna have their unit on the boat, but now they have just small cylinders as their diluent gas or their bottom gas. So, and they'll have their bailout tanks, but it's not the same as an open circuit diver walking on the boat with 4 sets of doubles and, 2 or 3 more decompression bottles to support the 2 sets of doubles that they have for the same type of dive. So basically, the rebreathers are great in the respect that they give you unlimited bottom time now. I mean, virtually. So you can spend as much time underwater as you really need to be versus the open circuit where you're limited to the amount of gas that you have. There'll always be a place for open circuit diving, okay? The rebreather diving, it takes a certain technical individual or technical mindset in order to operate one of these units. Where open circuit, it's a lot more recreational, okay? They can, they know what gas is in their tank, okay? They're gonna go, whether they're diving nitrox or trimix, whatever it may be, they know what's in that tank, okay? Then all they need to do is put their regulator on it and get in the water, basically, okay? With the rebreather, takes a lot more preparation, okay? They need to know what type of gas their diluent gas is. They have to go through all their checks prior to getting in the water. So where a person on open circuit could probably be in the water, dressed up and in the water in a matter of 3 to 5 minutes, that rebreather person is gonna take more like 10 to 15 minutes to get in the water.
Describe some of the events you've seen in these deep dives on the Andrea Doria.
Well, I guess the transition between deep air diving and technical diving or mixed gas diving, it's like night and day, okay? I think back on dives that I've ran on the Doria. One case, I had a team of 3 divers with me, okay? Ran a penetration line into the wreck. At the same time, I was shooting video as I'm penetrating the wreck. The team that I had with me was right behind me. They're picking up artifacts, pieces of china, little intricate things that are all over. But I was on deep air and I just had one concern, and my focus was on getting my team in and getting my team out, okay? So looking back on that dive after it happened, we looking at video, okay? Because now I have the video that we shot. And it was amazing to me how many things I was swimming over, and because of the narcosis, okay, I wasn't seeing them per se, okay? Also with the oxygen toxicity problem that we may have been generated while we were down there. So coming out after that, seeing all of this, it was like, wow, if I had a clear head, I could have picked those things up and, I would have had some china and I would have had some decent things after that dive. So looking back on that today versus going back and doing the same dives, okay, because, once you see this video, it's like, oh, that's cool, I'll go in there and I'll check that out on the next dive, that was mission planning. So, with that being said, going back and doing the same dives on trimix, it's like night and day, because now you're diving there with a clear head, okay? Much safer, okay? You don't have the oxygen toxicity problems. You're reducing the amount of decompression that you have to do because you're using ultimate gas technology. So that was a pretty memorable experience going in and out. been diving since I was 16 years old, okay? 58 years old now, I'll be 59 in June. Over my career, I've seen quite a bit in diving. I've seen quite a few fatalities in diving. But then again, as an instructor, I've trained people to dive wrecks of the Andrea Doria. So that tickles my heart. Diving for me is a way of life, okay? It's changed my life. It's brought people into my world that are very good friends of mine that I would have never met unless I was a diver. So, that's a little bit about it. I really don't want to talk down on this interview by bringing some deaths into it, because there has been a few. And more so than anything, we try and say that it's diver negligence is what causes it, but sometimes that's out of context, okay? I've been bent, okay? I've dove a wreck called the Carolina off of a vessel called the Sea Inn back in the day, another vessel that another dive boat that I was crewing on. Cleared my stops. It was a trimix dive. Cleared my stop. Went in, set the anchor. At the end of the dive, pulled the anchor, come out. And all it took was moving or a very hard workload on the dive that can cause you to get bent, okay? So I spent that dive, I decompressed like I was supposed to. Next morning I woke up in my bunk and, my whole arm was pinned, it was just got numb. Started at the elbow and then it was working up towards the fingers. Now sleeping on the boat after that at the dock, because we were scheduled to go out and dive the Resor that next day. And that was my birthday, actually. It happened on my birthday. So I spent my 33rd birthday at a recompression saver for about 26 hours before they can clear that. So that was a pretty memorable dive in my respect. And, basically opened my eyes long and wide as to you can still clear all your stops, okay, and get bent. Okay, it all depends on your body physiology and what your workload was at the time. So everything in scuba diving is slow and steady and not to exert yourself, not to exert a lot of energy. So yeah, that was a pretty memorable experience. But more so than that, I've had a pretty charmed life in that I've been able to dive wrecks all around the world, from Florida Keys out to the South Pacific. Being in the dive business afforded me to do that. Really into the artifacts, recovering artifacts, and sharing them with others. I'm not that kind of guy that likes to take an artifact and throw it in the garage and leave it in a box and not see it again. I try and put things on display. I try to work artifacts into my everyday life. We've got this Andrea Doria table that I spent few years making, but getting up every morning and having my coffee at that table or having my family sitting around that table to have dinner is pretty fulfilling for me, and being able to pass that on after I'm gone. So that's a pretty cool aspect of it.
Are you still taking charters to the Andrea Doria, being the largest vessel that can take 12 customers out there?
We are probably the largest and longest running vessel to run trips or run adventures currently out to the Andrea Doria. Not everyone is qualified to go out there and dive that wreck. So my vetting process is pretty substantial. I'm not about to bring anyone out there. We've had a lot of deaths out there on the Doria. So everyone that comes and signs up to me, they have to be trimix certified, okay? They have to have, and they have to show me proof that they have deep wreck diving experience, that they have current diving and strong current experience. If that's not the case, then I'm really not interested in bringing anyone that doesn't have the credentials or the proper mindset to go out there. But yes, our boat's ready to go out to the Andrea Doria at, any given time. Takes a little preparation to get the boat ready for it, but if we have 10 adventure seekers, okay, that have the qualifications to do it, my crew is more than ready to bring you out there, okay? But again, you have to be ready to do that kind of dive. I've trained divers to get out there, and if you have the proper mindset and you have the proper drive, it could take maybe just a couple of years before you're ready to go out there and dive it. But you have to put in the groundwork beforehand. You have to get the experience. But yeah, our boats are ready to go anywhere. We're ocean certified, we're licensed to carry quite a bit on our boat, 58 people. And it's a very useful platform. It was set up, by myself, and, other divers made their recommendations as to what to do, and that's why we have such a nice vessel at this point.